So the Labour mayor has accused the Treasury of blocking tourism levy despite a devolution pledge. I'm going to read into this more from Byline Times, you guys. So it says that the Labour's mayor of the North East, Kim McGuinness, has said the government's progress on the devolving powers has been slow because our leaders haven't trusted local people. And this is actually true. I would actually agree with that. I don't think governments trust local people. They talked a lot in the run-up to the election about, obviously, devolving powers. They have said early on in government that they are going to devolve much powers. But how much devolved powers have they actually been giving to them? How much have they been intending to actually give what is necessary for these local governments to be able to do what they need to do? Now, one of the biggest problems, obviously, if you want to talk about local councils, we know local councils are in crisis at the moment due to a lack of funding, and we know that because we've been hearing a lot about significant funding and cuts here. But in terms of specifically here about a tourism levy here, now, I don't have a problem with a tourism levy. I think, whenever we have tourists come to the UK, we should want them to spend a little bit more and pay a little bit of tax as well. Because one thing I've learned is many European countries have things like this anyway. So it's like, why not us raise revenue in this way as well? I don't know what the issue is with this, with a tourism levy in particular. But the argument, obviously, Kim is saying here is that the government are being slow on all these matters. Are they being slow or are they intentionally delaying? I think that's another question we should be asking ourselves about this Labour government. So let's have a read into this, shall we? So, the Labour mayor for the North East has criticised the government for holding power too tightly in Westminster after she claimed that calls for powers to introduce a tourism levy have been blocked. The government's landmark English devolution bill had its first proper debate a week today, on September the 2nd, when Parliament returned from recess. The bill promises to give every area in England a devolution deal by 2030, handling more powers to locals and mayoral authorities. But while welcoming the bill, Labour's elected North East Mayor Kim McGuinness suggested Rachel Reeves Treasury is blocking moves to give them powers to introduce a small tourism levy, as is common in many European countries. Tourism hotspots include Cornwall and Bath have recently written to the Treasury urging ministers to let them implement a fee for visitors to bolster local services. In a foreword to a new report from the progressive think tank Compass, McGuinness writes, "There is a long way to go until we truly devolve power. Progress has been slow because as a nation our leaders haven't trusted local people." The Labour mayor, who was elected in May 2024, adds, "I want to charge a visitor levy, a small fee to stay in hotels. It's a charge that's so mainstream across the rest of the world you would barely notice it. Yet widespread support among mayors, we're struggling to get this off the ground. Power once again is being held too tightly in Westminster." So she's calling for Keir Starmer's government to go much further than its current devolution plans, giving mayoral authorities powers to control taxes in their area. Devolution cannot be just a tick box. It's not completed once a mayor is in place. We'll never see the true success of our regions without physical devolution. I'm not calling for it all at once, but small steps, including this visitor levy, would be positive moves to demonstrate the government's commitment to a real deluge of power, McGuinness says. And I think that's how it should be done anyway, in small steps. And in a way, you can actually use that analogy as well about Brexit as well, because one of the things that the Labour government have been doing have been making small steps to try and mitigate some of the barriers that have been put up on us as a result of Brexit, and trying to undo some of those barriers, but doing it in small steps and doing it quietly, not to incur the wrath of the right-wing media, obviously, because they don't want to be told that Brexit was a bad thing and whatnot. And like I said, I do agree with this analogy here, is that it needs to be done in slowly anyway. You can't just give everything to them, and the thing is that they know better. They understand the areas better. They know where money can be better inputted from. They need to be allowed to be able to do what is best for the people in those areas, because at the end of the day, Westminster doesn't know what's best for people up in Manchester. Westminster doesn't know what's for best for people down in Devon. Westminster certainly doesn't know what's for best up in Glasgow, for example. So it's better that devolution powers are given to those who need it, rather than it being in a place where unless they live and grow in that area, they're not going to know for sure. They will look at numbers, they will look at statistics, they will look at reports, but they don't have the feeling of it as local people do. So she writes, mayors are using the powers that we already have to deliver, but for us to make the difference the local people need, those in Westminster must go further. Ultimately, they must trust local people to know what's best for them. The English Devolution and Community Empowerment Bill was introduced to the House of Commons in July, part of a manifesto pledge from Labour to move power outside of Westminster. As Compass notes, the bill brought the most wide-scale reform to local government in England since the establishment of directly elected mayors in combined authorities outside of London in the Cities and Local Government Devolution Act of 2016. The bill establishes strategic authorities, larger single-tier councils across England, serving populations of approximately 500,000 people. It will grant mayors enhanced powers to accelerate housing delivery and enable mayors to borrow from major projects and infrastructure. It will also provide a new strategic authorities more oversight of transport, including e-bike regulation, adult education, housing planning, local healthcare, and the development of local growth strategies. A new local audit office will help scrutinise council expenditures amid a collapse in local government financial security scrutiny since the coalition-era abolishment of the Audit Commission. The bill's two most significant provisions, in Compass view, are the restoration of the supplementary vote system for mayoral elections and introduction of a community right to buy, giving communities first refusal to purchase local institutions' assets when they are up for sale, including pubs, sports centres, community centres and parks. However, authors, including Dr. Jess Garland of the Electoral Reform Society, note in the report that council elections will still take place under Westminster's first-past-the-post system, which often means local councils are unfairly dominated by one party. That needs to change. A former Secretary of State for Communities and Local Government under Gordon Brown, now Professor John Darwin, also calls for Keir Starmer to go much further on devolution. He writes that the current constitutional setup says, quote, Parliament might debate whether it was a good idea to force the privatisation of multinational bus companies, for example, but few questions were right on the centre to do so. Though we are so used to this model of Westminster and Whitehall control that we often forget how odd it appears to observers in nearly every other European nation. Government's current vision will still leave England locally with far less control over the resources they raise and spend it almost in almost every other European nation. He also calling for stronger local government, local scrutiny of mayors, backing the creation of powerful independent local public accounts committee, mirroring that of parliaments. Quote, these would have a mix of senior councillors in it and independent members and be expected to by expert advisors on the new audit service. Government ministers are working on the idea, but apparently you will need to wait for another bill later in Parliament. Dr. Jess Garland, the ERS, appointed to research showing that councils with weak electoral accountability, defined as those with 10% or more uncontested seats, have been under the same party control for more than 10 years, or at least two-thirds council seats in the same party. They have roughly a 50% higher corruption risk and correspondingly 1 to 4% in lost savings on procurement contracts. Sarah Longears, the chief executive of the Centre for Local Economic Strategies, argues that the government doesn't seem open to the idea of physical devolution. And it barely got a mention in last year's devolution white paper. Not even fairly low-key tax rising initiatives such as tourism taxes or green taxes breaks make in it. Not for the first time, the Treasury remains unwilling to let it go. Yeah, this is a problem. Powers over tax, as is the case in Scotland, have long been called by England's regional leaders, including Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. The report also calls for the current mayoral council, who brings together England's metro mayors with national government, to become a statutory body with the right and a duty to co-design all policies that are national in intent but implement locally. However, the authors argue, none of this can work without financial powers transferred to local level. Some campaigners are also concerned that ministers have taken a step backwards when it comes to community empowerment. The Labour government's recent decision to end the Community Ownership Fund has caused concerns among pro-localism groups. It was a programme that has, in the words of pro-devolution think tank locally, supported hundreds of communities across the country in taking ownership of vital local assets, particularly in more disadvantaged areas of the country. Tony Armstrong, the CEO of Locally, told Byline Times that the inclusion of the right to buy for communities in the English devolution bill deserves to be celebrated. This is a significant step forwards for community power, something we've been campaigning on for many years. However, communities need resources to make most of theirs right. In recent years, the Community Ownership Fund has been vital in helping to save hundreds of communities' hubs, pubs and clubs. With the funds now ending, there is no dedicated support available from government and for communities to take over valid assets. For every neighbourhood to be able to reap the rewards of the right to buy, especially in the most disadvantaged areas, it must be backed with proper resources. A spokesperson for the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government told Byline Times the government has no present plan to introduce a visitor levy in England. Places can already introduce a levy on overnight stays through working with their local tourism sector using accommodation business improvement district model. So, yeah, the government are basically saying, no, you can't do that, basically. Even though that even though that they're supposed to be giving more devolution powers, basically, in this. Is it really a case? Is Labour really going to give the powers that they need to local governments to be able to do what they need to do? I don't know. I'm a bit more sceptical now, especially when you've got Labour mayors. Obviously, the difference between Labour mayors and Labour MPs is obviously that because of their positions of power, they can criticise the government because they know they can get away with it to a certain extent as well. So, and I have to say, Kim is right. That they want to be able to do things. They want to be able to get things done in their areas, and they want to be able to have a bit more control of taxes in their areas as well. In doing so, it will allow them to be able to manage their budgets better and be able to raise more money as well. It would actually benefit Westminster in the long term if they did so, in the short and long term if they allowed that to happen. But it is a case of a lot of power holding on to power as well. Very fascinating article. What did you guys honestly think about it? What did you make of Kim McGuinness's comments on the tourism levy being blocked? Let me know your thoughts and more on all of this down in the comment section below if you can. Now, if you found this video interesting, informative, maybe helpful, hit that like button, share it across social media, subscribe if you haven't already, check out Rumble and Patreon for exclusive content, and if you want to financially support me in the work that I do here, you can click on the join button down below to become a YouTube member for as little as 99p. So thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.